A mountain man in 1850 Oregon Territory marries a local townswoman under false pretenses, entrapping her to play housemaid and nanny to his 6 feral brothers. After giving in to Stockholm Syndrome, she then helps the wild man children find women of their own to marry. No, this isn't a horror film. It's the 1954 big screen musical 7 Brides for 7 Brothers. And that's what we're enduring this week on Movie Bones. Ryan, this is got to be hands down the scariest movie I've ever seen involving mountain men, Ryan. And I've seen Deliverance, and at least that movie, it was intended to be scary. This movie is like it creates a whole new level for me. I mean, when we get to the reviews, you guys out there are going to hear something new from me. It's actually created a new rating for us at the bottom and it's one I sincerely hope that we never have to come across again. But that's kind of giving the end away a little bit. So folks, I kind of gave you the setup in the intro in my own words. The movie is based on a short story by Stephen Vincent Benet called The Sabine Women. I just can't believe I said that. Which in turn was based on the ancient Roman legend of the rape of the Sabine women. So, good musical fodder there if you're going for something like in the tone of maybe Sweeney Todd. But this is the 1950s, and you're not going to get a dark musical around this subject. So instead, we have Adam Pontopie, a boisterous vessel of testosterone bellowing out his desires to get him a wife in the same way that a rancher might peruse livestock. He finds Millie, a capable woman and, of course, stereotypically beautiful by American standards, who can also cook. Yay! She can cook? Of course, he immediately proposes, and she slaps him upside the head. Accepts joyfully. Upon taking her back home, she realizes that he lied to her about the nature of what her new life entailed, because she's put immediately to work tending to him and his 6 feral brothers that he neglected to mention existed, which only brought to mind another movie about a woman surviving in the midst of a family of wild men, and one that I will never watch, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So, she tames the men, sets their sights on getting wives of their own, and chides them, and I do say chides, when, as in the original fable it's based on, they proceed to forcibly abduct 6 women from the town. It's all resolved with a humorous scene of mistaken rape. And Ryan, do you have anywhere to go from here? Am I missing something?
You did not talk about any of the dance scenes.
It's like it is one of those things. Like it's like, and I could, if I were to say something good about the movie, it's like they were skilled at dancing. But you know what? It was a bit overshadowed. Something else has kind of got in the way of me enjoying the singing and the dancing, especially toward the last third of the movie when they got to that whole rape thing.
Yeah, this is a movie, folks. You going scorched earth on it is perfectly okay. I want to make that very clear right out the gate. I'm not going to defend anything about this movie other than rewatching it. I could see maybe the appeal for people that like musicals and whatnot. Because yes, I will give some good things about this musical. The singing's good. The dancing is good. I wouldn't say there's songs that you just remember, but those parts of this film are actually pretty good. And the set pieces are good and things like that. But yes, I believe I said this in our last episode when we talked about this little, what was coming up, that this is a movie from a very different time, about a very different time. So we would be having to not necessarily take our own beliefs, because I think there's some things even wrong for those time. I think people would look at that and go, this isn't right. Some of the things that happen in this movie were not right. The biggest thing being, obviously, is treating women like commodities.
Yes, from the very beginning.
Even though the women pushed back, I would say that no man learned a lesson that women were their own autonomous beings.
Yeah, that's my assessment as well. I mean, it's a tricky thing, even in the best, to try and like, I just don't, I'm trying to picture it. Like, what could you possibly do to make sure they got their comeuppance to the point where the severity of what they were doing is justly addressed? And the only thing I can think of is, well, they're in jail. You know, they're in jail at
Yeah,
best. And in those times, probably you get hung. But it's like, because that's what the townspeople were out to do. And given the charges against them, given in the time period, it's like, yeah, they'd probably be within their rights. This is the Oregon Territory. There's not a lot of law and order. But it's like, that's about the only way. Because the way they're portrayed is so problematic. The one song that got in my head the worst is the one where it's like where Adam Ponape, he's the head brother, I guess, the one that gets married first. He's singing about the Sabine, or as he says, Sabine women. And there's a particular line that it's this upbeat, joyful, kind of happy-go-lucky song, and it's about the rape of the Sabine women. And he's referencing this historical thing to his brothers, who are, and it's like, and how the women, it's like they were sobbing, but on the outside, but on the inside, they were enjoying it. And I'm like, that's downright evil. And maybe Mel Brooks could have done something with it. He's the guy, if you go to for like satire and turning things on their head, even risque things like racism and sexism, he could do it, and he could find a way to pull it off. But this is not some kind of Mel Brooks, comedy where he's skewering, conventions here and there, left and right. This is a straight up, musical play that's celebrating its story, pretty much as it is, unless I missed something.
I don't think so. I think you're hitting the nail right on the head. To be honest with you, yeah. I mean, I didn't realize that this was based off of anything. I didn't actually look it up. Told you last week that this was a movie that I remember watching when I was a kid. And it was probably, now that I think, as I was watching it, I'm pretty sure it was like the dance numbers that probably made me intrigued, because it's really one big dance scene. And I thought that was a pretty interesting scene in and of itself. It's like just on the surface. If you didn't know anything else was going on in that movie, that's a pretty
Yeah,
interesting
yeah.
scene, because what it does is it marriages
Nice choice of
well,
words.
yeah, it marriages what feats of strength are supposed to be. And even if this movie didn't have like the other issues with it, in that world at that time, a feat of strength was something that would be perceived, looked at for husband material. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I hear you. It was a popular conception
Yeah,
about what makes a good man.
yeah.
And
So,
as
but
far as,
anyways,
yeah,
that's not what my kid brain was thinking. I thought it
no.
was just like a kind of a neat scene. Anyways,
Well,
I
no,
did not
if you
know
look at
that
the,
this
if you,
was.
I'll give it to you. It's like if you're watching it as a kid, you're not following a
Yeah,
plot. You're looking at the dancing. Look, there's some real good athletics here that would be like, it's like these guys, some of these guys, if you told me it's like they went on to go to do some Olympic stuff in gymnastics or something, it's
yeah.
like, hey, I believe that.
I
It's
think I
some
actually made
sincerely good
that.
stuff that way. Yeah.
I think I actually made that observation. I told that to my wife. We were watching it, and I said, "Man, these guys should have been in the Olympics. Dang, they're that good." But anyways, now that I know that this was based off of like a Roman story, I started thinking about it, and like if we wanted to change the movie up and make it a more palpable for a modern audience and whatnot, and base this off of something similar, but is actually like, because both these people really do fall in love. The myth of Hades and Zeus, not Zeus, I'm sorry, not Zeus, Hades and Persephone. That particular myth, anyways, or legend story, is Hades takes Persephone, who is the daughter of, and I'm not going to say her name correctly, but the daughter of the Greek goddess of nature and things like that. And basically, Hades does some trickery to marry her, but she does actually fall in love with Hades. Like, it's not, he doesn't force her, because you can't force a deity to do something like that. Anyways,
This is common practice in
Hades,
those myths too. I've seen
yeah,
this in other stories too.
well, her mother gets really sad about it. And what happens is she decides that she's going to stay. And this is how you get different seasons. Because when she goes away to be with Hades, it becomes wintertime. Like that's what happens. It becomes fall and winter. And then when she comes back, you have spring and summertime. Because there's an agreement amongst all three of these beings that she'll stay with her husband during these certain times, and then she'll come back up to the surface, be with her mother or on Mount Olympus during these other times. And like when you watch this movie, what happens in the movie? They're gone for how long are they gone for? They're gone for the winter.
Because of the mountain
And
pass. Yeah.
yeah, because of the mountain pass. And then when did they all get to meet back up with their families again? When it's springtime. You could have done something like that and made it more willing on the part of the women. See, the movie, let's be real, the movie really, it becomes not good in that respect when they decide to go back to town. And spoiler alert, what happens is the men go off because they feel like they've been, oh no, they're forced to leave by their brother. I think Adam's the reason why they have to leave and
Leave the
everything. But they're
town,
all,
or
well,
which direction
after the little dance thing.
because I forget who's responsible for that at that point. I mean, I could just say that the town, they weren't welcome in the town anymore because
Yeah.
obviously the
But
other folks in the town clearly had it out for them. The fact that they actually went ahead and it, in a ha-ha, it's got to be one of the worst ha-ha moments of I think I've ever seen. Toward the very end, where the plot mechanic they get to resolve all of this involves finally the pass has been cleared, right? There's a miscommunication about what the women are supposed to be doing. The actual women actually of their own volition. This is crazy to me. Despite the fact that they were kidnapped on their own, just to start deciding one after another that yeah, actually, I can look past all that kidnapping thing. We just like those guys so much. So they're actually going to defend them. And I forget exactly the twists and turns, but it has to do with the fact that the men are trying to get the women to go back and show themselves to the guys coming up the pass so that they can clear it all up. The women are trying to run away from the men, from the brothers, and in the midst of all this, then the townspeople show up. And it looks, because of this whole situation, that their suspicions have been confirmed, and here they are in the very act of rape. And that's clearly the intention of that scene. That's what, but it's like womp womp. I'm just sitting there, and my jaw is hitting the floor, and I feel it's like this is what puts this movie a different level for me. Is that unlike a movie like we've seen movies before where there's sexism. We talked about it in 20 Million Miles to Earth and a bunch of other ones too. But those weren't part of the main plot. They were little side bits here and there. The main plot is usually the monster or whatever other B movie type stuff there is. Here, it's central to the theme and the moral of the story, even, which connects it even more closely to that central theme. And it's so jarring. It felt the only feeling I felt disgusted. I felt kind of dirty, actually.
Yeah. So here's always the issue with these kind of movies. And I'm not defending it. I want to make that very clear. I'm not defending it. But, you've heard the question, what would you do if you were born in this time and this really objectively bad thing is happening during this time? And obviously what we want to say is we want to be the morally upright person. Right?
You want to, and this is the debate
but
that
if
goes
you're-
on. Yeah.
Yeah, but if that's the world you're coming up in and it's just around you all the time, do you see it as problematic as it truly is? And that's what I love about being able to look back on these movies, because we can look at it and we can see the good things. We've already said the music's not bad, the acting, the singing, the set pieces, those aren't bad, but there is this giant problematic element of these movies. The treatment of women who are not treated like people, but as commodity, almost as cattle.
Yeah.
Really.
Oh, exactly like cattle, because
Yeah.
from the very first opening song sung by Adam himself when he's coming to town to fetch himself a wife is "Bless your beautiful hide."
Yeah.
And he's like, "What do you think of when you think of hide?" It's cattle.
Yes.
And they actually make
Yeah.
another joke later on that's directly related to cattle and the women in relationship to the women as well. And so it's not like a subtle, they do make the direct comparison. It's not even like something I have to intuit. It's just there.
One of the things that we're not going to tell you, no matter how we feel about these movies, we're not going to tell you not to watch these movies. Really. We can't force you to not watch these movies. And if you want to shut your brain off and watch these movies and enjoy what is right there in front of you without thinking about the plot, you feel free to do that. We're not against, I can't stop you.
The question is like, from a perspective of would I ever advise someone to watch this?
Yeah.
Then I have to say, yeah, I think it's almost, I take the attitude of, what do we do with like those Confederate statues of like Nathan Bedford Forrest, right? Similar problem, right? And I've kind of come down to the position that it's like, yeah, I don't agree with destroying things that were created at any point in history. However, it's not the proper context where it's placed. And that's what I would say. It's like it belongs in a museum with a different kind of subtext, with the actual, what does this actually represent? So we can study it from a distance. And I think that's the best way I can say about movies like this. If you want to watch it, I'd recommend heavily that you look at it from a perspective of film analysis and also with a very critical mind. Because, there are a lot of attitudes that are very similar out there even today.
I would say while that's a minority thought, it's a loud thought on the internet. And there are people that want to go back to this way of living and thinking.
Yes.
So to add to your point, if you're going to watch a movie like this and you have someone around you that is learning that, like someone younger, especially, boy or girl, it doesn't matter. It is your responsibility to tell them this is not a proper way of living. It's not right. We should not treat... You don't get to walk into, as a male, you don't get to walk into a town grocery and just tell people, I'm looking for a wife.
Yeah.
No, that's not how it works at all.
I'd say it offends the objective dignity of the human person and we're talking about, objectively.
You also, partly because this is very illegal, but you also don't get to go kidnap people because you want them. That's not right. That's called kidnapping, and that will land you in jail for a very, very,
very long time.
Long time.
And rightfully so.
But yeah.
To step back a moment until that point where in the plot, which is like, again, like I said, two-thirds of the way through it, I was ready to give it like, this is going to be a don't look at it, but at least there's some goofy bits like you can make fun of. That's kind of a nuke the fridge thing if you take it in snippets. And that's where I was kind of going until then. And one of the reasons why I to get to some of the lesser criticisms, one of the deficiencies of kind of having the brothers kind of almost like, Millie having Millie as their angel voice on the one side and Adam on the other, who's every time Adam speaks to them, it's like the little devil on the shoulder. And when Millie speaks, it has almost like an instantaneous effect on these men, which kind of robs them of any kind of individuality. They just kind of, it's like, this is what we do because this is what the angel said to do. And oh no, the devil's saying that. We got to go jump and do that now. It feels like they're very much without any character per se. I guess they give one of them, they try to give one of them some extra character, but I think they just gave them more lines.
Yeah, it's really the youngest. See, that's another issue with this movie is like, that's why we're not giving them names. I mean, they have names. The 6 other women in this movie and the 6 other men in this movie, they're just there.
Yeah.
They're just there. They don't have any kind of character arcs. Really, the only person that has a character arc, I would say, is Adam. And all Adam does is just goes from being a jerk to being less of a jerk for a moment to being a real big jerk to being less of a jerk again.
The change of any character is supposed to reflect the theme of the story, but it's so minute compared to everything else you've seen. It's like, that's why it makes it especially problematic.
So what would you do with this movie?
What do I do with this?
What are you doing with this movie?
Well, I'll tell you what I do with it. I kill it with fire. I feel like Indy in the Raiders of the Lost Ark where, the snakes are down there and he pumps gasoline on it and just tosses the torch. Like, that's where I'm at with this movie, burn it with fire. I will say that I really, really sincerely feel that if you feel like the same disgust I felt, we'll try harder to make sure this doesn't happen again. So, yeah, that's what we'll try and do. Because to be honest, I've only ever seen one other movie that ever would qualify this, and it's outside of Movie Bones. I don't even want to give the name of it, But it had similar thing where really, really toxic behavior is part of the main theme, and it validates it at the end. Yeah, it kind of gives the rubber seal of approval, and that those movies, it's the same feeling of disgust. So yeah, kill it with fire. How about you, man?
So I'm almost on that same track of thought that you are, but I do think there's like a lesson to be taught here if you need to teach a lesson, and that is how not to be. Like, I mean, it's perfect for how not to be,
Oh yeah,
and then you could also use it for other things. But I don't really have a reason to watch the movie more than once, to be honest with you.
yeah. If you like the
So
dancing, just look them up. Look up the dance scenes, especially the lumberjack. The barn raise, especially the barn raising part. Go look that up online, and you don't have to deal with anything else.
yeah,
That's what I
I
would
think I'm gonna
suggest.
give it anywhere between bad dates, don't look at it, and nuke the fridge. Because if you can ever find a riff tracks of this movie, that might be a fun time. Because they'll just if they think something's bad, they'll just go
Oh
off
yeah,
on it.
oh yeah,
But like I said, there's probably some lessons to be learned here of how not to treat people. But I'm not going to tell you to go out and just don't pay money for this movie.
Well, while we're drowning out what we just watched, we'd like to remind all of you folks listening out there to subscribe, like, and comment on the Movie Bones YouTube channel. Follow us on Facebook, and of course, follow us in your podcast purveyor of choice. Tell us what you think of the movies we're watching together, and what films you'd like to see us assign on future episodes. So next week, Ryan, do you know what we're doing next week?
Yeah, it might be a depressing movie.
Not more than this, I guess. For me, it can't be worse
Actually,
than this.
when I say depressing, I mean it might be what could be a sad movie. But if I'm correct, I believe it launched a famous actor from that time period's career, one by the name of Andy Griffith.
And that is a surprising thing, because if you look at the poster for it, it's like the most un-Andy Griffith thing I think I've ever seen in a poster.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. But the movie, folks, is titled "A Face in the Crowd."
yeah, that's
So
our
why don't you
movie,
come
The
and join
Face in the
us?
Crowd.
I think it's
What?
going to be a good
Yeah.
one.
Hopefully it will be. Yeah, I'm looking forward
Yeah.
to it. So anyway, I guess that's about it, Ryan. There's not much more to say. I mean, we've covered the elephant in the room. We've talked about what we're doing next week. So I guess there's nothing else to say, but, see you next week.
See it. Don't go kidnap people.
Don't kidnap people, folks. Can't say
Don't
that
do
enough.
crime.
Don't do crime. Okay, folks, we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.